We have some breaking news. Mitch McConnell, Republican senator, a longtime leader of the Republicans in the Senate, will not be running for re-election in 2026. He is 83 years old as of today, and he will be exiting the Senate at the end of this term. So this is perhaps not a surprising announcement, given a lot of concerns with his age, his frailty. He has looked to be not in great condition lately. I believe he had a fall sometime in the last week.
Quite recently, yeah.
He's had a number of falls. There were obviously a couple moments of him freezing on camera in the last year or two that concerned a lot of people. He is no longer the leader of the Republican faction in the Senate. He has passed on that role, but now he will also be out of the Senate at the end of this term. You know, this is a figure who was tremendously powerful and influential, probably one of the most important Republican congressional leaders in our nation's history, overseeing the confirmation of several the Republican efforts to get through Supreme Court justices who back conservative policy agenda, judges just more broadly. And so a very important figure, although one who has recently become very maligned by Trump and the MAGA movement, as he is seen as kind of representing an older guard, personal hostility with Trump, has voted against several of his cabinet picks, Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr. So he's kind of going out on a low note for him, even though he has been responsible for so much conservative policy being implemented.
Absolutely. The news itself is not a surprise. For a man turning 83 who has had some of the freezes that we have mentioned and you know, in general, is increasingly, I think, in frail condition.
Only in Congress is it even a question whether you'd retire at that point.
That's very true. But I do think that the bigger and more important point is the change of the Republican Party from a kind of McConnell-esque party to a Trumpian party. Now, I think that the McConnell party had plenty of cynicism and all the rest to it as well. You know, famously, I mean, you mentioned the Supreme Court justices. I think on the Liberal side of this country's divides, he's often remembered for having blocked Merrick Garland when President Barack Obama nominated Garland in 2016. And McConnell's rationale for doing that was, well, really, the American people should get to decide at an upcoming election who they want to have that power. Then, at a later point of the Trump presidency, Trump nominated Amy Coney Barrett. That was in September 2020, and McConnell backed that and had no issue at all, didn't think it should wait for another election after all. So that's the kind of politics that he represents. Setting aside the Supreme Court issue, obviously much more interventionist, much more supportive of American involvement in Ukraine, for example, which you and I were talking about earlier, and just generally more, very much more identified with the Republican Party of sort of big business, corporate interests, foreign policy, interventionism, those kind of things. Not a populist by any stretch of the imagination.
No, not a populist by any stretch of the imagination. Not, I would say, not particularly a libertarian either, although maybe his economic policies are ones I like, although I'm not sure that that's really what puts him in conflict with Trump. It was mostly personal. You know, he criticized Trump for the events of January 6th and Trump's election behavior. And then, yes, in recent years, he has been a full-throated defender of interventionism, of using American dollars to project American strength, of defending Ukraine, of all of that, very a neoconservative kind of ideology to him that has just fallen out of fashion so much on the right. That is not what the MAGA base wants, to the extent now he's portrayed in conservative media as a rhino, you know, despite being more responsible than anyone else for conservative wins on Roe v. Wade and a host of other issues. He's thought of as a rhino for where he stands now. It's you know, it's the old it's the quote from Batman that you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. He's been in that role so long that he is now very much not with the times of where MAGA is.
No, he's not. And one of the difficulties that McConnell has had in recent years is there are good reasons for people of almost all ideological complexions to dislike him or to object to him. I mean, you mentioned the January the 6th issue, and for a lot of Liberals that was the perfect encapsulation of their problem with McConnell, because he got up, I believe it was on the floor of the Senate, and said that he thought that Trump was morally responsible for the events of that day, and then voted to acquit him. And it's like, you have to decide one way or another. He wasn't saying, oh, it was all fine and dandy, as he shouldn't. I mean, my views on that topic are well known. But to actually say Trump was morally responsible for that, but I won't do anything about it, is a very Mitch McConnell approach, in my opinion.
So now the question becomes, who's going to run for this seat? Kentucky, like every state, there are 2 senators. Kentucky's other senator is
your friend,
my favorite
your
senator, Rand Paul, who is of my ideological
sure.
bent and has been a guest on Rising many times. I make no secret of the fact that I broadly agree with him. Kentucky also has my favorite member of the House, or one of my favorite members of the House, which is Thomas Massie, someone who even people on the left, I think, have some affection for and appreciation for being principled on foreign spending and some of the things he's said regarding the Israel-Gaza conflict. Extremely libertarian member of the House. And I guess the question will be, is he interested in making Kentucky by far the most libertarian Senate delegation and running for that seat? He would have a lot of support. There's a lot of respect for him in conservative media, I think, and independent media even. So he might. I wonder if he'd want to make a go of it.
Yeah, I mean, Kentucky's an interesting state politically because, of course, despite being a very deep red state, it has a Democratic governor in Andy Beshear. Now, I can't recall off the top of my head, this is literally breaking news about McConnell, I can't recall if Beshear is term limited anytime soon. Would he consider making a Senate run? I would think you would have an uphill climb to be elected to the Senate, but, I mean, you would have an uphill climb as a Democrat to be governor, and Beshear did that. So it'll be one to watch for sure.
It will definitely be one to watch. More to come on Rising later today. Please stay with us.